Somebody stop me!
Jim Carrey before the year 1994 was just starting to get more attention. After being in failure after failure, including a TV show cancelled after one season and multiple panned TV movies, he finally started finding his groove in the innovative sketch comedy show In Living Color.
Nice to meet you, folks! Fire Marshal Bill here!
His wacky characters and personality made him a fan favorite and gave him a taste of what Hollywood felt like. But this success was nothing compared to what he would receive in 1994. After being an unknown for basically his entire life and actually living in a van before much of his comedy career, he went on to have the lead role in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. These three classics went on to set Jim Carrey up as one of Hollywood's biggest stars and collectively grossed over $700 million in the worldwide box office. But before I talk about Jim Carrey's successes, we have to go back to the beginning. Jim Carrey's first experience in something related to comedy was in the year 1977 when he was just 15 at Yuck Yuck's Comedy Club. However, a teenage Jim Carrey made the mistake of performing impressions in front of a crowd that had a more raunchy taste in comedy. Carrey's first stand-up experience, to say the least, was a bomb. In fact, it was so bad that the founder of the club, Mark Breslin, went on the mic and said to the entire crowd, totally boring, which is kind of crazy for just a 15-year-old. But anyways, even if he was a hit at the club, his family's financial situation was still hindering his chances at a comedy career. That was until 2 years later, when in 1979, Carrey made his return to the stage. This time, his family was in a much better financial state and he also practiced his material a lot more. And after this, Jim Carrey finally started getting paid to do gigs at the Hayloft Club. After these gigs got him off the ground, Jim Carrey started to become a much more promising star in Canada. Pretty quickly after his gigs at the Hayloft, Carrey went back to Yuck Yucks to perform another set. However, this time things were drastically different, as a reporter for the Toronto Star, one of the biggest newspapers in Canada, saw him and put him on the front page of the entertainment section, writing that he was a genuine star coming to life. And that's really how Canada saw Jim Carrey. They truly believed he was destined to go to Hollywood and make it big.
Impressionist Jim Carrey is only 19 years old, yet he has played in Las Vegas, LA, Toronto, Montreal, and New York. Here's a sample of why he's been pegged for stardom.
With his momentum going, Carrey started doing more and more work, with him appearing in an episode of An Evening at the Improv, landing a starring role in a TV movie named Introducing Janet, and opening for well-known comedian Rodney Dangerfield. With all these successes, it was a no-brainer that he would eventually move to Hollywood to make it in the States. Now, it's important to remember that especially during the 70s to the 90s, as a comedian, appearing on a late-night show could do everything for your career. With millions of people tuning in to watch your set, if you did well, your fame would skyrocket. Which is why it was Carrey's main goal to appear on The Tonight Show when he got into the US. And after a couple tries and around only 10 months in Hollywood, Jim Carrey finally had his late-night debut in The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And he was going to do this to promote his new show, The Duck Factory, in which he was also the lead character. So it seems like Carrey was a quick success, right? I mean, he made it onto The Tonight Show very quickly and also was the star to his very own NBC sitcom. But there's a reason why this video is about Jim Carrey in 1994 and not about him in 1983. First of all, Jim Carrey is an impressionist. He's not a regular stand-up comedian. And while his material is funny, he would have a much harder time connecting to audiences with only impressions. For example, take a look at Steve Martin, someone who got wildly popular in the 70s for appearing on late-night shows and doing stand-up. Now, I'm not saying that Steve Martin's comedy is basic, it's quite the opposite actually. With all his absurdist humor, his stand-up actually provides a good backbone to his style and also provides a lot of variety to the audience, something that Jim Carrey's impressions just didn't have. And the second reason why Jim Carrey didn't get famous after his late-night debut is simple. The Duck Factory was bad. It didn't lean into Jim Carrey's strengths for physical comedy, it struggled in viewership, so it was just cancelled after 13 episodes. And it was because of these two failures that Jim Carrey just floated around Hollywood for the next few years with his impressionist act. He had an appearance on Late Night with David Letterman in 1984, he starred in a TV movie called Once Bitten, which was kinda shit, and also had supporting roles in multiple movies that bombed in the box office. It seemed like in the 80s, Jim Carrey had a lot of potential that was just wasted.
Hi, I'm Milo, and thanks for tuning in.
Now, just to give you some background on Jim Carrey's life, before he got cast for In Living Color, and before much of his early success, Jim Carrey used to be basically homeless. I mean, he lived in a van as a teen in Canada, and he also worked multiple odd jobs, like as a janitor and also in a tire factory. But even when he was making money with his impressionist act, his life was far from comfortable. But despite all of these issues, he never gave up hope that he would eventually become a star. That was until the end of the 80s, when Carrey finally started to realize that his impressions probably weren't going to help him progress any further. Which is why he started to add other elements of traditional stand-up into his sets, but this caused issues with the audience and bookers for clubs who only wanted to see him for his impressions. This put Carrey's comedy career basically on hold until Damon Wayans, his co-star in the movie Earth Girls Are Easy, asked the creator of In Living Color, Keenan Wayans, to add him to the cast, and after a crazy audition from Carrey, he was in.
Getting these roles that didn't showcase him. He wasn't able to do what he does. And this was the perfect opportunity.
Now, In Living Color was a show that was supposed to be a sketch comedy that had a cast of mostly colored comedians, with Carrey being one of the only white members of the cast. Now, before it even started, the odds were kind of stacked against it, but In Living Color went on to be a huge success, and with a lot of skits emphasizing Carrey's skill for physical comedy and impressionism, he quickly went on to gain much more attention than he ever had before. Weirdly enough, I think that Jim Carrey's impressions worked much better in the sketch comedy format than they ever did in the stand-up format.
I'm platinum bigger than Marley and Jimmy and Yellowman, but I'm not even mulatto. My reggae's watered down.
And it was his very attention that led him to getting his first role of Ace Ventura. 1994 was the year where Jim Carrey's fame would exponentially explode. After years of gradually growing, the months leading up to 1994 was when Jim Carrey would get the most motion in his career. Now, before Jim Carrey was ever offered the role of Ace Ventura, the studio behind it, Morgan Creek Productions, offered the role to Rick Moranis, but he turned it down. And after the movie floated around for a few years, they eventually approached Jim Carrey after seeing his eccentric performance on In Living Color and offered him the role. But he actually turned it down, saying the script was horrible and unfunny, so he was given full control to rewrite the script and then star as Ace Ventura. Now, the studio was originally scared about the outcome of these changes, but the movie had a relatively low budget, so if it flopped, it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. And the same thing happened a couple months later with The Mask. After New Line Cinema bought the rights to The Mask comic years prior, the movie was originally going to be much more gory and a lot more similar to the comics. But after director Chuck Russell realized that vision wasn't going to work, he wrote the script modeled for Jim Carrey after seeing his Rubberface sketches on In Living Color. He took it so far to the point where he told the studio if Jim wasn't doing the movie, he wasn't either. And after Carrey read the script, he immediately signed on, saying that it was perfect for him. So at this point, at the beginning of 1994, both Ace Ventura and The Mask were done filming for months, and Carrey and the studios involved just had to wait until release. But they didn't have to wait long, as Ace Ventura: Pet Detective released in theaters February of 1994, and it was a smash hit. Off a modest budget of just $15 million, it made roughly $107 million, and while now the comedy has aged quite a bit, it was huge in the 90s. After Ace Ventura's smash in the box office, The Mask released just a few months later and grossed even more at around $351 million on a similar budget. After these two successes, Jim Carrey was finally a Hollywood star. After all of his struggles, his hard work had finally paid off, but he wasn't done yet. Also released in 1994 was Dumb and Dumber, in which he was paid $7 million for after the success of Ace Ventura. Now, looking back at this decades later, was some of this luck? Yeah. For these roles to be lined up for Jim Carrey all around the year 1994 was kinda lucky on his part, but these roles were given to him because of his unique talent. The Mask was written specifically for him, and he literally wrote most of Ace Ventura. These movies needed Jim Carrey to be a hit as much as he needed them to become a star. Without his talent and persistence, Jim Carrey would probably still be a niche impressionist from Canada. But years later, after 2 Golden Globes, billions of dollars at the box office, and numerous comedy classics, Jim Carrey is one of the greatest stars of Hollywood.